Hey everyone, my name is Marion, and in today's tutorial we are going to be building this California surf page using Sketch. Down in the description you'll find a URL where you can download all the assets that you need, and if you've done that, let's get started. So it is nice if you're already a little bit familiar with Sketch, but if not, then that's okay. I'm going to take you through everything step by step. First of all, in the files that you've downloaded, you will find a sketch file, and if you open that, you will see something like this. What I've done for you is I've set up all the colors already that we're going to be using today, and I've already set up all the text styles. The only thing that I haven't done yet is actually creating layer styles and text styles out of them, which is something awesome that Sketch does. If you reuse colors and text styles multiple times in your design, it is a very good idea to just make layer styles and text styles out of them, because that way your design is going to stay consistent. So let's get started by adding layer styles. We're going to start here at the top with the brand colors, and you can hold the Command key to access a layer right from within a group. So I'm going to click on the first color swatch, and right here in the panel on the right, I'm going to click on Create. Now we're not going to have too many colors today, so I'm going to give them easy names. So for the first one, I'm going to say colors / let's say blue - dark. And we're going to press Enter. Now this means if I make a new object, which could be, for example, a circle, by default it is some kind of gray, but now I can go within Appearance and look at that, my blue dark is saved. I can just click it and it is the exact same blue as our example, which is great because now we know for sure that throughout our file, we're going to use the same kind of blue. So we're going to do the same thing for all these colors. Let's go to the next one. Again, in our appearance panel here on the right, we're going to say Create. And it is very important to be very consistent in your naming. So I prefer to always use lower caps. That way I know for sure that I'm not accidentally creating two groups when I really wanted just one group. So I'm going to say colors, and in this case I'm going to say / teal. Now the reason I use colors and then a / is Sketch is going to group these for you. You will see later on when we're going to add shadows, for example, that we're going to say shadows instead of color, and then as we are designing it becomes way easier to find these layer styles. Again, I'm going to hit Enter so that it saves. The next one is this. I'm going to say colors / purple. Then the next one, colors / yellow. And the last one is another type of blue. So we're going to say colors / blue - light. Okay, so if we have a look at our colors right now, we have blue dark, blue light, purple, teal, and yellow, just like we just entered. And throughout the rest of this tutorial, they're all going to be available as layer styles for us. Let's move on to the neutral colors and some functional. We're going to use these later on for this yellow, for example, for a star rating. So therefore, I'm going to give it a name of rating / yellow. And these others are going to be neutrals. So instead of color, I'm going to say color and then / neutral, and then I'm going to do another /. What that means is that I'm basically creating another folder within colors called neutral, and within neutral I'm going to have these three color swatches that I'm about to add. So I'm going to say neutral / black. And in this case, I'm going to say colors / neutral / white. And for the last one here in our functional and neutral colors, I'm going to say colors / neutral / gray. And the last layer styles we're going to need are these shadows. So it will be a nice idea to put these in a folder called shadows. So we're not going to mix them up with this particular white because they're very similar. And the little swatches that you see on your screen are very little, and it's going to be very hard to tell the difference. So you see here I have two with a shadow, and these are the settings of the shadow. I have an X and a Y position of 0, 2, and then a blur of 70. And over here I have a blur of 40. So it's a little bit less of a shadow, which I can use to name them properly. So in this scenario, I'm going to click the first one. I'm going to say create. And rather than color, I'm going to say shadows. Let's say shadow, actually. No, let's say shadows. I also use colors, plural. It's also nice to have a system for yourself to be consistent in that, so you don't accidentally make mistakes. So shadows / white, and I'm going to say -large. Remember I said we have a blur of 70, meaning it's a little bit of a bigger shadow, so therefore I'm going to call it large. And then the other one, I'm going to obviously call it small because it has a lesser blur and therefore is smaller. So when creating the large shadow layer style, what I quickly did is copy the text, and in this case I can just paste it and only replace large with small. Again, this is one of these other things that are going to help you be consistent in naming, and you're just less likely to make mistakes. And our last one, let's call it shadows / teal. Since we only have one and it uses the teal color, let's just call it what it is. Enter. So here we go. We've added all of our color styles. Great start. Now let's move over to the text styles. As you can see, I've already added all of them here. And just like we do with layer styles, we're going to reuse these headings and body copy. So we're going to create text styles out of them. Now the only thing that text styles cannot do, or I'm sure there's more things that text styles cannot do, but one of the things it cannot do is you cannot mix color styles or layer styles with text styles within Sketch. So we have to give them already the color in which we're going to use them. But as you can see, I've already done that for you. So let's click on the first heading 1. And we're going to go over again to the panel on the right. And under appearance, just like with the colors, we now see that we have no text style. So we're going to create one. And again, naming is important here. So in this scenario, I'm going to say headings / heading -1. Okay, and again, I'm going to use Command A to select all and Command C because I'm about to add another heading. And to not make a spelling error, it's just easier to copy and paste. Don't forget to press Enter so it actually saves the text style. Now you might be wondering, why do I have two heading 1s? Within Sketch, if you create a layer style, one of the things that comes with that, text style, whatever comes with that text style, also the alignment of the text. So we're going to use both left aligned and center aligned. And to not get confused with changing a particular text style in an instant, we're just going to create two of them. One for left aligned and one for center aligned. So over here, I'm going to go again to create. And remember, I copied the text, so I am less likely to make spelling mistakes. there it is, headings / heading -1. The only thing I'm going to add now is centered, because otherwise I'm not going to know later on which one was the left aligned one and which one is the center aligned one. So I'm going to use space and I say centered. And again, press enter to save. Let's move to the heading 2. And as you can see here, it's a bit of a different heading. It has a shadow already applied to it. The reason why that is we're going to use it later on top of an image. And for the text to be easier to read for the user that is going to visit this page, we're going to need some kind of shadow. If you check out the file, you can see exactly how I did that. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we do have to make a textile out of it. So again, I'm going to say create headings / heading -2 and enter. And we have 2 heading 3s. Like I already mentioned, you cannot apply layer styles to textiles. And we're going to need it in both colors. So I'm going to make 2 textiles out of it. Headings / heading -3. And then I'm going to say space white. Well, let's say light. And for the other heading 3, we're going to say headings / heading -3, and we're going to say dark. And if we move over to the side a little bit, I already put a text box here with body copy text. Again, check it out how I did that, what kind of specs did I use, just to see kind of why I did what I did. One of the important things here that you have to look for is line height. Because if you increase your line height, it's gonna make your design breathe a lot better and it becomes much easier to read for the user. And it kind of gives like a luxurious and modern feel to it. What I did here is I typed here body copy normal, so we all know what it is that we're looking at. And then I put some lorem ipsum text here, just so I could play around with this line height, because in order to do that, I obviously need multiple lines of text. So in here, we're also going to create a textile out of it. And instead of headings, this is obviously not a heading, so we're going to say body copy. Ooh. And we're going to say / normal. Now I know I'm also going to need this textile in a centered version. So let's say left after this, because I know this is left aligned. We're just going to create a new one for center aligned. Now, in order to create a new textile, we need to have something set up that represents that textile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this current text box. To do that, you can press Option-Alt on your keyboard, select the box, and then press Option-Alt. And I can now just drag it down another version of it. As you can see here, in appearance, it already has a textile applied to it, which we just created, so it makes sense. But we're going to change something onto this textile. We're going to center align the text, which you can do right over here in the panel on the right. So I'm going to center align the text, and as you can see now, there's a little asterisk next to the textile. That means that you've done something to the original textile. You've made changes to it, which in some cases is okay, but you want to try, especially in bigger projects, to create separate textiles for all the styles that you actually need. So rather than here saying update, which is very tricky, don't do it, because that means this one is also going to change because they're connected. We're going to say create, even though we already have one. When you say create here, it just means you're going to create a new one of the current version of this text box. So It already has a name of the original one, just with a 2 at the end. We're just going to get rid of this. We're going to say body copy and then / normal and then space center. That way we have the distinction between the left aligned and the center aligned. And last but not least, we have a body copy small. It also has a little bit of a different text color, which comes with the text style, so you don't have to worry about it. We're going to say create, and we're going to say body copy / small. Now we only have a left aligned for this, so we could add left. Let's do it, because you never know, maybe in the future we'll add our center aligned. So we're just going to say left just to make sure that this is a scalable sketch file. If we expand it in the future, we're all good to go. And enter. And that was the last one. So we've set up all our color styles and layer styles and our text styles right now. So we're good to go. We can get started on the actual design. Now, if you scroll a little bit to the right in your sketch file, you will see an artboard that I've already created for you with some waves on it. And we already have a footer. So the artboard is here on the left in our layer list, and we can see we have a footer, we have a wave bottom and a wave top. Now I've already locked these two, and for now we're not going to use the footer either. So if you press your Option Alt key on your keyboard and you hover over the layer, you will see that their little lock icon appears, and you can just click it, and now this footer is also locked, meaning I cannot do anything with it, which is great because it's already in place. Just like the waves, we don't really want to be touching it. All right, let's have a closer look at this artboard, because you will see these red lines, and you might not be familiar with that. These red lines are a 12-column grid. Now we're going to use that in order to make our design work really well for developers as well, to create responsive websites. If you want to learn more about that, this is probably not the video for it, but check it out. You can find this on websites, for example, like Bootstrap. They're going to explain to you what exactly this is into detail, but I've already set it up for you, so you don't really have to worry about it for now. We have 12 columns that we're going to be working with. If you're not familiar with this, you're going to see as we design what this actually does. For the ones that do know, we have 12 columns. Our column width is 80 pixels, our gutter width is 20 pixels. And that's it. Let's get started. So you've downloaded a assets folder, and let's have a look at what is in there, because there's a bunch of stuff that we actually need. I created 3 folders for you, one with icons in it. We have an arrow, we have a star for rating, we have a C, which I'm not sure we're going to be using, but it's there anyway. Maybe you want to do something creative with it. And we have a little tiny wave, you can see it up here, that we're going to be using. As you see, they're all SVG files, meaning they're vector, so we can blow these up as big as we want without them getting pixelated, which is awesome, especially again in responsive web design. Then we have a folder called images. All these images come from the website called Unsplash. Check it out. I've already done the resizing for you, because usually when you download images from Unsplash, these are huge files. They're like 5 to 10 MB, I would say. If you drop those in your sketch file, within no time you're blowing up your sketch file. The sketch might even crash. It's just not an ideal way of working. It really slows your workflow down. So what you want to be doing is downloading images from Unsplash and resizing them before using them in your sketch file. And last but not least, there is a logo folder. And as you can see, this is also an SVG extension, so we can really blow this up as big as we want. There it is. And actually that's the first file we're going to be using. So what you can do is from your Finder select it, and literally you can just drag it within your sketch screen. And if you let go of your mouse, it will drop it there right away. Now we're going to be placing this on the first red line we see of the grid. Now don't mistake that for this darker red line. That's called the margin that we're going to take into account. But for a design, it is really important to start here at this 130 line. Okay, Sketch will help you. It kind of snaps to it, so if you zoom in enough, it's pretty easy to place it right there. If you want to double check if you place it correctly, you can always check here at the top right. The exposition right now of this selected element is 130 pixels. Now we're going to have to place it a little bit higher because, well, a logo just is at the top left corner. I want to have it 30 pixels from the top. Again, there's two ways of doing this. You can check out here, the Y position currently is 41, meaning that this logo is currently 41 pixels from the top. Again, I want it to be 30. So if I wanted to, I could already move it up 11 pixels and then I know it is exactly 30. But there's another way of doing this. And really this shortcut you're going to be using a lot. If you want to go for pixel perfect design, and this is your go-to shortcut. It is the Alt Option key. So if you select an element in Sketch and hold the Alt Option key, you will see the distance between, in this scenario, the top of the artboard and the actual element. As you can see, you can also see the left side, which is 130. We had already set that, so that's great. But this top is currently 73 and I want it to be 30. So I'm going to move it up 3 pixels with my arrow keys. Then I know it's 70. And another shortcut is if you want to move an element 10 pixels at a time, you can use Shift and your arrow keys. So it's 70 right now, so I'm going to hold Shift and use my arrows. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know it's going to be 30 pixels. And as you see here again in the Y field here at the top, double check, it's exactly where we want it to be. Let's move on to the navigation. So as you already saw in the beginning, I have the final result right here, so we can kind of have a look as we go to see what we're actually working on. So we're going to be working on this part. It's going to be easier if I put this right next to here. So it's easy to check that. So first we're going to start with Home, and then Search Spots, Meet the Pros, and Contact. So we need 4 text boxes. To create a text box in Sketch, you can use the shortcut T. I'm all about shortcuts, so I'm going to do this in shortcuts as much as I can. You can really just drop it anywhere. It doesn't really matter for now. So it's going to be Home. And then I can use the Option Alt key, just like I showed you before while making the body copy text styles, the left align and center. You can use the Alt Option key and just on the selected element, just drag it and you'll get another version of it. Let's see, what is the second one? So it's Search Spots. And then we have another one that says Meet the Pros. And we have Contact. Let's imagine this is going to be like a 4-page website and we're just building the homepage right now. Okay, so these menu items, I want them 40 pixels apart from one another. And in one of the latest versions of Sketch, they gave us this really neat tool called Tidy. So if I drag with my mouse over all of them to select them, I have this button here at the top right that says Tidy. And Sketch is going to clean this up for you. So right now it's spaced it evenly with the space in between of 33.5 pixels. We actually want this to be 40 pixels. So I can just go in here, type 40, press enter, and Sketch did all the magic for us. Now, of course, if somebody's on the home page, which is the one that we're building, we want them to know where exactly they are. So I'm going to take this home text field, and rather than this being light, I'm going to make this bold. So it's really clear to the user. We're going to actually put a wave under it later as well, but at least we want it to be as clear as possible to indicate that they're on the home page currently. And because I made it bold, it might have gotten a little bit bigger, so I just want to double check the spacing between home and search spots. And as you can see, half a pixel difference. We never want to be working in half a pixels anyway, so I'm going to use the tidy. Again, it's the easiest way. Now, in our layer list, you see these 4 layers, and I'm just going to group them because they're now 40 pixels apart. I don't want them to move anymore. Just as a whole, they can move, but these 4 elements, the placement is correctly right now. So with these layers selected, you can press Command G for grouping. And the first thing you want to do is Command R. For the people who know me, I'm super picky with renaming layers. So Command R, please right away do it, always. And instead of group, I'm going to call this menu items because that's what they are. Now, if we talk about placement of this menu bar, we're just going to move it all the way to the side. And just like with the logo, we started on the first faded red line. We're going to end there too. And in terms of how much from the top, how many pixels from the top we wanted, that number really right now is not super relevant because what we want is for it to be vertically aligned with the logo. So with the group menu item selected, I'm going to press Shift and select the logo as well. If we use the alignment icons here at the top, we're just going to use this second to last one to vertically align it. And again, to double check, we can use Option Alt and we can measure 30 pixels from the top. Perfect. So that's it for the top part. I'm going to select both items again, so logo and menu items, and I'm going to group that again too. Because again, I want that to always stick together. So Command G, Command R, renaming, and we're going to call this menu. Okay, there we go. So we got our first part done, and it is time to work on this section. So what we're going to have, we already have all the text styles for it. So we have a heading 1 here, we have some body copy here, and we have this image here. So let's get started on this part. Let's start with the heading. Again, we press T on our keyboard for a text box, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to, oh, that's of course the image, so I can't cheat even. I'm going to have to type it. If you're having a bad day, catch a wave. And did I make any typos there? Well, there we go. Now, since we've already set up all the text styles, all we have to do right now is just go to Appearance, where you see that there's no text style applied, and we're going to go to Heading, Headings 1, boom, we're done. That's really all that there is to it. Now, we also want this one to start here on the first red line. To double check, our X position is 130. And the width of the text box is going to be 380 80. There we go. Now we're going to add some body copy. And this one I am going to cheat and copy and paste it. We press again T on the keyboard, and I'm just going to paste the text here. And like I said before, it's just as easy to go into appearance, and we're going to select body copy. So here you can see the groups that we created before with the /. So in here we're just going to say body copy normal, but we want the left-align version of it. There we go. And we're going to place it right below it, and it's going to have the same width of 380 pixels. Okay, so now the spacing between the heading 1 and the body copy is going to be 20 pixels. It is currently 24, so I just have to move it up 4 pixels. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, it's not selected. There we go. 20 pixels. And I noticed this little 1 here when I was checking that on the left of this text box, so something's off. If I check here in the positioning, you see that my X position is 129, and that of course needs to be 130, just like the heading 1 and the logo. Next up is this button. So now we're going to get into symbols. This button is going to be a circle of 40 by 40 pixels. And using the O on your keyboard is going to activate the oval tool, which means I can draw ovals or circles with them. To draw a perfect circle, I just hold the Shift key and I drag my mouse to create a circle. It's going to be 40 by 40 pixels, and we already have a layer style for this. We've already created it. It's going to be the teal one with the shadow. So if you remember correctly, it's in a folder called Shadows, and then we said teal. So I only have to go to my layer styles. I'm going to open this folder called Shadows, and it is teal. There we go. We have our button. The spacing is going to be 40 between the body copy and the button. And then we need to put an arrow in there. Now, if you open your Finder, you're going to find a folder called Icons, which I showed you before, and there's an arrow in there already. So I'm just going to drag this in. Okay, and it already has a color. Now what we want to do is we want to create a nested symbol. So the arrow is going to go in this button, but I want to reuse this arrow perhaps in the future. So to make this a scalable sketch file, we're going to create a symbol out of the arrow, and then we're going to create a nested symbol for this particular button. If you don't know what nested symbols are, just follow me and it will probably click. So for this arrow, I'm going to select it, and I'm going to say here at the top, create symbol. Now again, just like with text styles and layer styles, it's very important to name them properly. So we're going to name this icons and then / arrow. So it's going to create a folder called icons, and within that it's going to put arrow. And I want to send this symbol to my symbols page, so I'm just going to say create. Now, if I have it selected on my artboard and I press enter, it's going to take me to my symbols page. And there's now an artboard with that particular arrow on it. Now, to make this as flexible as possible, we want to have all the icons on square artboards. So I'm going to create an artboard that is 40 by 40 pixels. Really, the size doesn't matter as long as it's square and as long as they're all the same. My go-to is 40 by 40 pixels, but it could also be 20 by 20, it can be 100 by 100, it doesn't really matter because we're working with vector, so we can scale it up and down as much as we want. So I'm going to have a width of 40 and a height of 40. Now, of course, I need to place this icon in the center because otherwise it's going to have a weird placement when we use it on our artboard. Another thing that's really important is to give this particular arrow a layer style, because if we don't do that in the symbol master, which is where we're in right now, then in the instance we cannot change the color. And Sketch automatically makes groups if you create a symbol. I'm not a fan of it, so I'm going to ungroup this, which is Command-Shift-G. And then you see I only have something left called path. This happens a lot with vector icons. They're all going to be called path, and you're going to get lost really quickly. So again, Command-R to rename, and I'm going to say arrow. With arrow selected, this layer, I'm going to go to appearance, and I'm going to give this icon a layer style. Could be exactly the same color as long as there is a layer style. So I'm going to just say blue dark. Again, it's the exact same color, but it's very important to sort of like activate the layer styles here so we can reuse them later and change the color of this arrow if we have to. Meanwhile, I'm just going to hit Command S a couple of times because I want to make sure that my document is saved. Now, I'm going to say here at the top left, return to instance. And you will see now that this is a bit skewed, but the only thing you really have to do, right click and you say set to original size. And as you can see now, it is 40 by 40 pixels. And I'm actually going to close this lock to always keep its proportions, because that's pretty important. Now this needs to go on here, but as you see, it's a bit big. We need a really tiny arrow. So it's going to actually be 12 by 12 pixels. And it has to be in the center of the circle. And once you drag it there, Sketch will kind of give you these red lines to indicate whether or not it's in the center. So right now I know it is exactly in the middle of the circle. If you want to double check, Option Alt. 14 pixels on all sides, great, this is perfect. Now I also have this oval layer, which I have not renamed yet, so I'm going to do that right now. Command R, and it's going to be button backgrounds. Together I'm going to actually create another symbol out of this. So I'm going to select the button background and the arrow icon. And again, I'm going to say create symbol. And this is what is a nested symbol. So I'm going to put a symbol within the symbol. And you can do this infinitely, which is awesome. I'm going to call this one buttons and then / let's say circle. Okay. And I press enter. Now if I go back to my symbols page and I zoom out a little bit, what do you know? We have two artboards, one with the arrow and one with the circle. And let me explain to you a little bit more about nested symbols. These two are currently connected. So if I were to draw literally a rectangle in here, you see that it also appears here. And that's the cool thing about nested symbols. If I ever wanted to make an edit on this arrow and that wasn't a nested symbol, I would have to do it both here and here. And now, since it's a nested symbol, I only have to make the change here and it will apply to all the instances of the arrow. All right, let's go back to design. Double check, 40 pixels from there. Perfect. I think it's time to add the image. Now you can add this image in multiple ways. I'm going to do this with image fill. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. Something like this. And let me give you the sizes. The width is going to be 755 pixels and the height is going to be 490 pixels. Okay, and then I'm going to place it on the last faded red line. So it fits really nicely within my grid system. Now I'm going to add a border radius so we have a little bit of rounded corners, and the value is going to be 4. And I'm going to apply a layer style to this. It's going to be a shadow, and I think we're going to go for the white large one. You see how it's nice? It has a little shadow, so like it's on top of that wave in the background. And rather than the fill being a color, we want that to be the image. So what you can do here on the right, in the right panel, is go to Fills, click on the color swatch over here, and rather than having a solid color as a fill, we're going to use an image, which is right this last icon. And since this is the last image I worked with, it's already pre-selected for me, but if you hover over here, you go to Choose Image, and you have your Finder right here, and you can just find the image that you want to put there. That's it. That was super easy. Now we have to work a little bit on renaming my layers, organizing them, and placing them properly. So this is still called rectangle, so I'm going to rename this, Command R to hero image. And then we have here text layers. You could rename them, you don't really have to. What I do like to do is put them in the order of appearance, so it's really easy to find them back. So this is going to go here, then the body copy is going to go right below it, and then we have the button. So these three layers make up the content here on the left. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to group this. So Command G, Command R to rename, and I'm going to say hero content. The reason why I'm going to group this, first of all, it keeps a nice and neat sketch file, but also so I can use this group to vertically align it to this image. So I'm going to select it. Oop, I also moved it, so be careful. I'm going to select this group, and I'm going to also select this image, and I'm going to use the same button as we've done before with the logo and the menu items, and I'm going to vertically align it. I also see that something is off here with the grid. I probably have a text box that's a little bit longer than it is supposed to be, because they're supposed to end right on this line here. So I'm going to check. Since I've grouped this, if I want to directly get to, for example, this text layer, I just hit the Command key and I can directly select it. This one seems to be fine, so it must be this one. As you see here, I am 4 pixels off, so I'm just gonna fix that right here. And now this looks all nice and clean. So we have our hero content and our hero image. If we work in order, then it should be this, and then together I can group this again. I'm going to rename it to hero section. And of course, this is going to go below the menu. So when we do this consistently, at the end, you will see that our file is super nicely organized. So this hero section, we want this to be 90 pixels from the menu. And it's 118 right now, so I have to move it up 28. I like to move it down 2 and then up 30. It's easier for me, so it's 90. As long as it's 90, you're good to go. Great, it's going great. We already done 2 sections. We've done our menu and we have our hero section, so it is time to move on to this section. And this one is going to be a little bit trickier because of this card. It's a little bit of a nitty-gritty, small pixel amounts, but let's go do it. We'll be fine. First of all, we're going to start with hottest search spots in California, which is another text box. So T on your keyboard. Hottest search spots in California. Now we already have the text style for it. It's going to be a heading 1. Actually, we want the heading 1 centered. That's the one that we want. So what I always like to do is make these text boxes as big as they can be. Again, this has to do with scalability of your sketch file. If in the future you ever decided to have a longer title and a developer has already coded this, it's nice for developers to know what the maximum width of a text box can be. So nothing crazy like this is going to happen in the future when there's some really long text in it. So, and my sketch crashed. Well, let's see what happened here. So for some reason my sketch crashed. I don't know why, maybe some plugins or whatsoever, but we're back, so let's continue. So I've added this hottest surf spots in California, and I was saying before that I always like to already make my text boxes the biggest they can possibly grow in a scenario that there's going to be other text in there someday. So therefore we had the center aligned heading 1 text style, and yeah, this is it. We're just going to make it go across from the first faded red line to the last one, which equals 1180 pixels. So we're going to use a spacing of 120 pixels between the sections. And that seems quite a lot, but really if you look at the end result, it's going to look really nice and spacious, and it's going to have a lot of white space, and the design is going to breathe nicely. So between all the sections, we're going to have 120. Double check with the Alt Option key, we're good to go. And as you can see in the final result, the wave is going to come in. All right, so let's open a Finder. And you will find in the assets folder the wave SVG. You just drag it in, and that is quite small, but I guess that's okay because it is vector. We're going to create a symbol out of this. So we're going to say create symbol. We're going to alter it later. So we're going to say icons/wave, and I'm going to press enter. Let's go to the master of that symbol. Like I told you before, normally I like to put all my icons on the same size artboard. You kind of have to, because otherwise you cannot interchange them within your instances. In this scenario though, I'm going to leave the wave as is. The only thing I'm going to do is just make it 40 in width to have at least something that is consistent, I suppose. Maybe we can make the height 10. Well, actually, let's make it 9. And then once we center and center align this, and then, yeah, good to go. 2 at the top and the bottom, 1 left and 1 right. Let's not forget to add a layer style to it, because in order to change the color later on, if we wanted to, we need to initiate a layer style here, because otherwise it's not going to work. Let's again say blue dark. And as you can see here, Sketch again made a folder out of this, which again, I'm not a fan, so I'm going to just ungroup this. And then it's called wave 1, which, why 1? We only have 1, so it can just be called wave. We're going to go back to the instance, and again, as you see, it's skewed. Right click, set to original size, and no. I see that it's not the symbol, so rather than set to original size, I'm going to say replace with, and then within my document, I can say icons and wave. And now I'm going to say set to original size. There we go. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, in our final design is a little bit larger than the 40 pixels in width, which is fine because, again, vector, we can just resize. Let's make this, let's close the lock so it keeps its proportions. We're going to make this 120 in width. And this is going to go on the center of the artboard, which is already very close to that, but you can just select one item and then use these alignment icons at the top, and then it's going to be in relationship to the artboard rather than another object, since we only have one object selected. Center it, and the spacing between the title and the wave is going to be 10 pixels. There we go. Good to go. Do I need to rename any layers? Not really. I'm just going to change the order. And then it is time to dive into this card element. Let's get started here on the artboard. And once we have all the elements, we can create a symbol out of it. You'll see we need a couple of nested symbols as well. So let's get to work. We are going to create a rectangle, so R on your keyboard. And we can give it a random size now. I'm going to give you the actual size, which is just easier to enter the values here. So it's going to be 380 pixels by 120 pixels. There we go. And we like a little border radius, just like we did on the image. So we have slightly rounded corners. And to be consistent, we're going to do the same as at the top. So it's going to be 4 pixels. Now we already have a layer style for the actual card background. And remember we had shadows? Let's use white small. Now don't be fooled, because sometimes if you zoom out a lot or zoom in a lot, you sometimes lose the shadow. It seems a bit glitchy in Sketch, but it's actually there, so it's fine. Let's have one more look at the end result. So we're going to be working with an image over here. We're going to have a title. We're going to have a star rating that we can actually modify per instance. Like over here, we're using the same symbol, but this last one is gray because it's only a 4-star beach. And it's going to have 2 lines of text, and it's going to have a level of difficulty indicator. Okay, so let's get started with adding an image. We're going to use the same trick as we did before. We're going to just draw a square, and we're going to use an image film. So to draw a square, just use the R for rectangle and hold your space, so it's always an even, perfect square. Now, the image is going to be 98. Actually, let me unlock this. This is actually not going to be a perfect square. It's almost going to be perfect. So it's going to be 98 pixels in width, and it's going to be 90 in height. And now, because of this size, we can have 15 spacing everywhere, which is going to be awesome. To be consistent, we're also going to add these rounded corners here on the image. So the radius is again going to be 4 pixels. Now you see now I have 2 rectangles. That can get confusing really fast, so let's rename them. The larger one is the background, so I'm going to say card backgrounds, and the other rectangle is the image placeholder. So I'm just going to say image. Then we had a little title that is going to be the city or the place, location where the beach is. So it's going to be a text box. And rather than just putting a name of a beach here, I'm just going to say location. And this is all going to make sense later on. We already have a text style for it, which we've done in the beginning. It is going to be a heading 3 dark. There we go. And since we used spacing here of 15 at the top, left, and bottom, let's also do this here on the right. So it's all nice and equal. So the location is going to go here. And again, some city names are longer, some are shorter. So I already want to make this text box as big as it can possibly get, which is, guessed it right, exactly 15 pixels at the end too, between the border of the card and the actual text box, which then equals into a text box of 237 pixels in width. Let's align it with the top of the card, of the image, sorry. So it's also 15 here. And then we're going to add stars. And let's check them out, because again, if you open your Finder, you will see that there is something called rating, and it is a little star. Let's drag it in here. And the first thing we're going to do is create a symbol out of this, because it's going to be a nested symbol. So I can just go here to the top and say create symbol, and I'm going to say icons / let's call it star rather than rating, because maybe I want to use it somewhere else where it's not related to rating, and then I might not be able to find it in my own library. So I'm going to say star. And I'm going to press enter so I can go to the master of this symbol. Let's move it up over here so we have all the icons together. And we need to change the artboard size to 40 by 40. And then on top of that, of course, we need to move the star to the center. And we're adding a layer style. We already had a layer style for rating, so perfect. I'm also going to remove this grouping here that is unnecessary, and then rather than color, we're going to call this star. Great. Now we can go back here and we're going to place it, and obviously this is way too big. Let's play around a little bit with the size. 20 by 20 still too big, 15 perhaps. Let's check it out. Let's work with 15 for now. And the spacing between the location and the stars is going to be 5 pixels. There we go. And we're going to have 5 stars in total. Some of them will be gray, some of them will be yellow, but that doesn't matter right now. You will see in the end how nested symbols and layer styles are going to do the job for us. So we're just going to use the Option-Alt key and drag. We're going to have 3 pixels in between. So if you measure this correctly right away, like I'm doing right now, and let go, I'm going to use the Command D shortcut to duplicate. So I don't have to drag more stars into this. I can just use Command D, and it's going to duplicate exactly what I last did, which is moving that star over, duplicating it and moving it over. And you can check if you want to, but we can trust Sketch on this one. There's 3 pixels in between all of them. Now, let's try it out. What happens if we wanted the last star to be gray? Which is great because we set up a layer style in the master symbol. We can now go here and we go to our colors, and we're going to go to our neutrals, and I can literally say gray over here. Boom, done. So this is the power of nested symbols. Let's go back and make it yellow. And I'm going to name these stars. Again, it's going to make sense in the end. So I'm going to say here star 1, and I'm going to keep doing that, star 2 for all 5 of them. And I also want to change the order when I'm done. So it's all nice and organized, and I'll show you later on what the actual result, how that helps us. So star 1 obviously needs to go first, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I'm going to group this and call this rating, because I always want them to stick together with this amount of spacing, and it's going to go below location, and image is going to be on the top. Super organized so far. So we're going to add another text box here, and this is actually going to be body copy small. So we're going to go to body copy, and here you see small left. Remember, we only had 1, but we set left anyway, because maybe in the future we'll have a centered as well, and then we don't have to, we're not going to get confused. We're going to make this as big as the location one, and once you get there width-wise, Sketch will give you a helper, so you know exactly that you're in the right spot. Spacing here, let's make it 5 pixels. And I don't really have text for this right now, so I'm just going to duplicate this. So we have 2 lines, and it already takes up the space of 2 lines. Let's have a look on how we're doing. Let's check with the final result. We're getting really close. I have a feeling we have to scale our stars down a little bit, and then we have these 3 indicators to build. I think our stars are still a little bit big, so let's select them. And let's make them 10 by 10. It's probably right. And now you see that we messed up our spacing. Now, This is where the tidy tool comes back in, because you see now that we have 8 pixels in between, and our original was 3. So I can just enter 3 here, enter, and done. Now I'm going to have to measure again. So 5 at the top, and we have now 10 at the bottom. There we go. Good to go. Then we have some indicators. And let's see. Let's make them 30 pixels in width. Sounds about right. And then we can just give them border radius, and we're just going to give it border radius all the way. There we go. Height 4 pixels sounds pretty good to me, and we're going to have to give it a layer style. And this one is going to be teal. 15 pixels from the image. And let's make this 10 from the text. And then it almost aligns with the bottom. Maybe we could work out this a little bit more so it works out perfectly fine, but visually it almost looks right, so I'm going to leave it as is for now. We're just going to duplicate this, and we're going to have 5 pixels in between. And remember Command D to duplicate your last action. And I'm going to call this level 1, level 2, and level 3. And I'm going to put this in order. Select all of them, group them, and renaming them. Now this is going to go at the bottom before the background, and then we have our type something text that is going to go in between rating and level. Now image, we only have a placeholder so far, not really even a placeholder for now, it's just a square or an almost square. Let's go to fills, and we're going to hit this last icon over here again. And this is really the default that Sketch gives you, is this checkered box, which honestly for now is just fine. We're going to put an image there later. I think we have all the ingredients to create this card, to create a symbol. So let's select all the layers. We've already organized, we've already renamed, so all we have to do is say create symbol. And we're going to call this cards / cards - small, because we're going to have a bigger one later on. There we go. It's going to go below the icon's wave, and yeah, this is now an instance of the symbol. If we press enter, we're going to see that it's also on the symbols page, but we've already done everything that we have to do, so no need to check here. We can start filling it in. So let's peek a little bit. So the first beach is going to be San Clemente, and if we just click on the symbol, in our panel on the right, we will see all the overrides that we have available. And this is where the naming comes in, because if we did not rename the stars or the text box to location, if we already had put a location there, or the level even, over here, level 1, 2, and 3, then this would all be called rectangle or something, and it becomes a chaotic to rename stuff properly. So let's start where we have to start. Let's really just start at the beginning. We're going to choose an image. In your assets folder, you also have a folder called images. And since we're working on this one, we're just going to say open. And as you can see here, it's been added. Then here we're going to type San Clemente and press enter. This text, I'm going to leave it for now as it is. You can change it to something else if you want. And I guess this level of difficulty is 2 out of 3. So what I have to do is, for this last one, I just need to overwrite it with a different color. Since we already applied a layer style before we created this symbol, it's already we can already use it. So here in level 3, instead of teal, I'm going to go to neutral and I'm going to go to gray. And that is it. Done. Now we really just have to duplicate this 1, 2 times and just change the content. I'm going to hold Option Alt, put this in the center of the artboard, and as you can see, this fits just really nicely with the grid system that we've built. Okay, so it takes up 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, then there's a gutter, and then we have another 4 columns for the second card. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Manhattan Beach. And we have an image for that as well in our folder. And I guess the last star was gray out of this. It was 4 out of 5. So rather than scrolling here, you could also just click this star, and then it just isolates just that particular nested symbol. So it becomes a little bit easier to work with just that. And we're going to give this a neutral color. Okay. I also see that here color, there's probably black in here, or neutral. See, I made a spelling mistake, so now there's 2 folders here, which is really, really annoying. And I'm going to go fix that, because it's not necessary that there's 2 groups. Also, in one of the latest versions of Sketch, we got this new Components panel here on the left. So if I just click Components, and I go to the center button here for text styles, sorry, the right one for layer, I can just click on here. And if I double click, I can edit the name. So I can just add an S, and this should work. Now all my colors disappeared, so that's definitely a glitch, but just switching back and forth, you see that they're back. So now black is part of this neutral. It's not a separate group called color, and the other group was called colors. So now it's all nice and organized. And the last one, we have to add another card, which is Hermosa Beach. And this is going to go here at the end. Again, 20 pixels in between. And choose the image for Hermosa Beach. You can change the star rating if you want, or a level of difficulty. I just showed you how to do it, so feel free to change it to whatever you want. Then the last part of this section is the button. And as you can see here already at the bottom, we're going to reuse this component. We're going to reuse this symbol. And the cool thing with Smart Layout in Sketch now is that we can just make one symbol, and no matter how much text is in there, we can reuse it, and the button will grow and shrink on its own. So let's get started on that. So for the button, we need a rectangle. That's what we're going to start with. So we're going to press R on our keyboard, and we're going to draw this rectangle. Now this rectangle is going to be at 50 pixels in height. And the width we're going to worry about later, because it's going to depend on the text that's going to go in it. Let's just first work on the layer style. Just like at the button here at the top, we're going to use the same layer style. We're going to use shadows and then teal. Now, as you saw in the end result, the button has rounded corners and fully rounded corners. So we're just going to use this slider and slide it all the way up. And we're going to have a text box inside of it for the actual button text. So T on your keyboard, and in this area it's going to say see all. There we go. And we don't even have a text style for that, so we're going to have to create it. The font that we're using is just like everything else, Montserrat. It's going to be bold. And it is going to be white. So you can just drag all the way to the top left corner, or use hex value FFF, and it's going to be all white. Font size is going to be 16. And I'm going to set the line height to 20. Now the reason I'm doing that, even though it's only one line of text, it impacts the height of the text box too, which is now 20. And since our button is 50 in height, I can align this super nicely in the middle of the middle. And for the buttons, I want capitalized text. So rather than writing in here all caps, I'm just going to write here normal and go to text. And we're going to go to transformation and we're going to select uppercase. So that if I change my mind, I don't have to go back and retype everything. I can just uncheck the uppercase and it's back to normal. And it's probably nice to do a little bit of character spacing, perhaps. Maybe 1 pixel. And then we're going to center it in here, and I probably want like 60 pixels on the side. That's enough. And then we have 88 here. There we go. 60, 60, and then 15 at the top and 15 at the bottom. So since we didn't have a text style for this yet, for the button text, let's actually create one. So it's going to be button text / let's say white. I'm not sure if we need more categories within that, so I'm just going to say white for now. We can always update it later. And if we go back to our layer list on the left, we have a text box called See All, and this I'm actually going to update to button text. So in our override panel, it will be called button text and not See All. And the rectangle is, of course, button background. Now these two together are going to be a symbol, and we're going to be applying smart layout so that if the text in here will be longer, we want this button to automatically grow and shrink if the text were to be shorter again. Selecting both layers, we're going to say create symbol. And first of all, we're going to have to name this properly. So it's going to be buttons / let's call this a primary button because it is using the primary color, and we're going to be reusing this a lot. I have a feeling within the design this will be a primary button. And just say primary. Now before you press enter or create, we want to be applying a smart layout. This is the only way that this is going to shrink and grow depending on its content. Now this button is always going to be in the center of the artboard. So if the text is longer, I don't want it to grow only on one side, either left or right. I want it to stick to the middle and grow both sides. So we're going to say horizontally center layout. Now we're going to press create. Let's check out, double check if we've got everything. 60, 60, 15. Actually, this looks great. If you forgot to add smart layout while you were creating the symbol, don't worry. You can always select the artboard of the master symbol and you still apply here the layout. So it would have been set to none if you hadn't applied it, but we already did, so it's horizontal and from the center. Now, to demonstrate to you what this does, if we go here to the overrides panel, and right now it is See All, what if it said See All search spots? If I press enter now, this button is going to grow, and that's the power of smart layouts. There we go. You saw how it stuck to the center and it grew both on the left and the right side. I only need to make one symbol right now, and I can use it for any kind of primary button that I'm going to have. Let's go back. As you saw, it also shrinks, and even if the text was shorter than See All, if it was just like, I don't know, okay, it would also shrink, smaller, make it smaller. Let's go back to See All. And notice how in here I don't even have to type in all caps because we've had the text box already set to that. It's going to be in the center of the artboard, and the spacing is going to be 60 pixels from the cards. So it's 53, We need 7 more. There we go. And we have another section done. So let's double check on layer organization, and then we can group it and call it section 1. So we have the title, we have the wave, then we have card. Let's rename these. Card, we can say card 1, card 2, card 3, and I am going to put them in order. And then we have the primary button below. So these layers are going to make up this section. So Command G to group, Command R to rename, and it's going to be section 1. Now it technically is the second one, but since the first one is called Hero section, I'm just going to start here with number 1. And then we move on to the actually last section. Since we will have the same title with the same wave below it that we already have, why don't we just duplicate that one? Again, hold Command in order to select the layers that are within a group, because if you don't hold Command, you're just going to select a group. You can either double click and go in it, or you just hold the Command key right away. I select this, then I'm going to hold Shift because I also want to copy the wave. And when I have both selected, it's going to be Command C. I'm going to click outside of the group, so anywhere on the artboard I'm going to click, and I'm going to paste, because I don't want to paste within that group. It's going to be its own separate group. And now I can move this down. If you hold the Shift key, it's not going to move around in the wrong direction. And Sketch already knows I'm going to want 120 pixels in between. Perfect. So rather than this title, we're going to have to type something else. So meet the pros. And that's already it for this part. Then we are going to have a body copy text. Now for that, we're going to already have a text style, so we just need a text box. And actually before I do that, we're going to grab some lorem ipsum. So in your browser, you can go to loremipsum.io. I enjoy this website because it looks pretty. Most lorem ipsum websites look terrible. So I'm just going to use this one. Select this piece of text, Command C, and I'm going to go back to Sketch and have a text box. This one I'm just actually going to draw because I don't want it to go all the way out of my artboard, and then I'm going to have to bring it back in. And I'm going to paste the text that I have. And I'm going to give it a text style because it's still set to this heading 1, but it's going to be body copy, normal, center. There we go. Now, the size of the text box is still big because that's what I drew. So I'm going to set that height back to auto, which I can do over here in alignment. Height is going to be auto. And the width of the text box is going to be 780 pixels. And once you do that, you will see, and if you center it in the artboard, you will see that it covers exactly this amount of columns in our grid system. So that's great. Spacing between the wave and the text box, let me zoom in a bit, is going to be 60. So it's 32 now. I'm going to move 2 up and then 30 down. There we go, 60. And we're going to create another symbol. And this one is pretty cool because I'm going to show you some cool things with sketch data, and I'm going to show you how to do an overlay on these images so that whatever the background image is, you'll always be able to read this text, which is very important in when you're designing for the web. That is, if you want it to be scalable, really. If somebody else in your team were to change this photo to something else and we didn't have that overlay, then, and they're not a designer, they might not even notice that. So to make this scalable and flexible for anyone to work with, we're going to create this overlay in the symbol so that whatever image is on the background, we're going to be able to read the name of the server and where they are from. So let's get started. Just like we did with all the images before, we're going to start with a rectangle, and the size is going to be 580, and the height is going to be 300. There we go. And if we place it on the 130 X position, and it fits right within these columns. So it's going to be 6 columns, which is half of the width of the page. Let's apply border radius like we've done before to all the rest of 4 pixels. And I'm not going to make this an image placeholder yet because I'll get a checkered visual, and I don't like working on top of that. So I'm just going to leave this gray for now and put the text on top of it. And then we'll do the image placeholder later. We're going to add a text box, and it's going to be the name of the server. So I'm going to say name. And this is going to be a heading 2 in our text styles. And as you can see, we've already gave this layer style the drop shadow, as I mentioned all the way in the beginning. And now you see why, because we're going to have that image in the background. We're going to have that image overlay, and on top of that I'm going to give this a drop shadow, so that all in all I really want to make sure that I can read this text, or the user can read this text. We're going to place this 20 pixels from the side. And again, it's important to make this text box already bigger, so in case that somebody has a really long name, it's going to fit. Another trick I'm going to show you, I'm going to make the width of this text box all the way to the end of the card. Okay, so it's here at the side. And here in the width field, you can actually do basic math. So I can here say -20 and press enter, and there you go, 20 pixels from the side. Below the name, we're going to have the city or town where this server is from. So we're going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to say, let's say location again, makes more sense, I guess. And this is not going to be a heading 2, but it's going to be a heading 3. And remember, we made a light one, so this is definitely where we want to be using the light one. Between these 2 text boxes, I'm going to want 10 pixels of space, like this. And then between location and the bottom, I want 20 pixels, just like on the sides. So I'm going to take both of these text boxes and then move them down. So I keep this 10 pixels that are already measured in between. And it's going to be 20 from the bottom. Okay. I'm going to rename this layer. It's not a rectangle. It's going to be card background. And we have name, we have location. This is the correct order. And I'm going to give this a layer style. And it's going to be the one with shadows, and it's going to be white large. Now, of course, you cannot read this text anymore right now, but that's okay, because rather than this fill of white, now is the time to say, hey, let's put an image here. We've already used this image, so let's pick the actual server. I named the file server 1 and 2, so self-explanatory. We can just start with server 1. Now, as you can see here, the background of the image is quite light, and then the text is also quite light. So if we view this on 100%, you know, this is not the most readable. In order to ensure that, we're gonna build this overlay. To build this overlay, we're gonna start off with a rectangle. And the rectangle for the overlay is going to be 86 pixels in height. There we go. And of course it needs to be below the name and location, otherwise we cannot read. And I also want to make sure that it has the rounded corners here at the bottom, but not here at the top. So there's two ways of doing that. I can either mask this overlay within the image, the background, or I can just give this border radius only at the bottom two corners. I'm going to choose to make this a mask later on. Let's first create the actual overlay. I'm going to go into fills, and we've already used this one, which is a solid color. We've used the last one for the image. We're going to use the second one over here. And you'll notice now how you get 2 points here, which is corresponding with these 2 points. Okay, we're going to set both of them to black. And it's very important to set both of them to black, even though one is going to be transparent later. Actually, let me show you what happens if you don't do that. Let's make this one white. Okay, and this white, I'm going to set the alpha, which is the opacity. I'm going to set this to 0. Okay, this is what we want. But right now you see this going from black basically to white to transparent. So we also want this color to be all the way black. You see the difference? This makes for a way nicer overlay. So they're both going to be set to 0, 0, 0. The top point is just going to have an alpha of 0, while the bottom one is going to be 100. So it's going to go from all the way see-through to a solid black color. I'm going to move it down a little bit so it matches with the bottom of this card. And as you can see now, we have straight corners again here. This is what I meant before. We want these rounded corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the overlay and the card background. And I'm going to say here at the top in my toolbar, mask. Now the overlay goes within the card background. It's kind of like a cookie cutter. We're cutting it out right now. And you'll see here the rounded corners at the bottom. I think we're good to go for creating the symbol. We're going to select all the layers. You see now, because I created a mask, it puts it in a group. It's okay for now, don't worry about it. Let's say create symbol. And we're going to say cards/card large. We don't need a smart layout or anything. This is a fixed size of cards. We're just going to have some names that are going to be longer and shorter than some others. Let's go in it, because the next cool thing I'm going to show you is sketch data. So when you have these components or these symbols, and you're going to have a lot of them sometimes, if you have to come up with all these fake names, that is just a waste of time, really, because you're going to sit and think like, okay, Jane Smith, John Doe, and then what, you know? So Sketch built this really cool feature is sketch data, and currently you can use names and locations for them, and that's exactly what we need. So I'm going to go to the master symbol, so make sure you're on the symbols page, because otherwise it's not going to work. I'm going to select the first text box for name, and I'm going to go to layer, and I'm going to go to data. And these are not available right now because we're in a text box, so it makes sense. We only have this text available. So sketch data, and I'm going to say here names. Now once I click it, Sketch is going to come up with some kind of name and it's going to put it there. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but there's a name there. We're going to do the same thing for location. We're going to go to layer, we're going to go to data, sketch data, and in this scenario, we're going to say world cities. Vancouver, great. So if you have this text box, the data set sort of like activated, kind of like a layer style, we can go back to an instance. And as you know, in the design, we need 2 cards. We need the other one as well. So I'm going to duplicate this one to the side. Again, 20 pixels in the middle, and you see it fits perfectly within our 12-column grid. And first of all, let's update the image. So going to be server 2. And let's update their name. So once we go to the name field over here, you see this little purple icon. That allows you to just swap names. So once I click it, I'm going to say names, and it's going to come up with some different name. Not sure if this name really matches the photo, so I'm going to just click it again. That is more likely. So let's leave it at that. And then, of course, well, not of course, but let's pretend he's from a different city. We can do the same thing with world cities. That is like right around the corner from Vancouver. Let's pick something else. Phoenix. Great. We're almost done. We've got one button left. And the cool thing is we've already done it. It's already a symbol, so we can simply go here at the top in the toolbar to Symbols, Document, Buttons, and it's a primary. So we're going to add it right here in the center, and we're going to have it say Read More. Okay. And then let's measure some distance, because that we have not done yet. I'm going to peek real quick. These two servers are going to be 60 pixels from this text box. Okay, and then the button is going to be 80 pixels. And you might think that that's strange because we haven't used 80 yet. Everything was either 120 or 60. But if we make this 60, I feel it's a little off balance. This looks a little bit too close. Compared to here, it's probably because these card backgrounds are white, so visually I think it matches better if we make this 80. Okay, so let's measure. It's 80. It's in the center of the artboard. And the last thing I gotta check is the distance between the button and the footer. And yeah, I have the footer locked. So I'm gonna unlock it because otherwise I cannot measure the distance. I'm going to say unlock, just click on the lock icon in the layer list. Now we can measure. It is 119, so really the footer should move 1 pixel down. And we can make that happen, not a problem. We're going to select the footer group, move it 1 pixel down. And I think you see it's a little bit over the end of the artboard here by 1 pixel. So let's make the artboard 1 pixel taller. I'm going to select the artboard as a whole, and we're going to make this, just use your arrow keys to go up 1 pixel, and that is it. Double check. 80 pixels at the top, 120 at the bottom, and to really make this a super clean file, we're going to put these in order. And then we have server 1, server 2. Them in the right order. The button is at the bottom. And I'm going to select all the layers, group them again, rename them, and it's going to be section 2. Look at that. Our entire page is just a couple of groups, and then we have the waves in the background. You could put those in the group as well. Feel free to do so if you want to. I think this is it. The only thing that I'm not really sure of, it's a tiny, tiny detail, but the color of this arrow, I think it might look nicer if it's white. Let's check it out. So since we have nested symbols with layer styles applied, we can literally just change it. I think I like it better. I think it has a better contrast, so I'm going to leave it at white. This is it. We have recreated this page. We don't need this anymore. Usually when I'm done, I kind of have a last check in terms of spacing if I did everything correctly before handing this over to a developer. I'm not going to cover that in this video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching and following me. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them here down below this video. And just subscribe. There's going to be more videos in the future. Also, micro interactions are coming up very soon. So stick around, and I hope to see you again.